vaccine passports, a very big issue. And of course, the government is still saying, oh, we will, we won't, we will, we won't. Oh, nothing we can do about this if private businesses want to say, no jab, no job, or if they want to say no jab, no entry, if it's a big concert or sports venue, whether it's a shop, whether it's a pub, whether it's a restaurant. Of course, they would absolutely have within their powers, given the amount of powers they've had over all of us and businesses for the last year or so, be able to stop the use of passports. But we are told that they will go ahead eventually. And so we're also told that in the event they do, there will be a vote in the House of Parliament first. The question is, of course, whether they can get that through, given that Liberal Democrats, many Labour MPs and Tory MPs are opposed. And of course, there is the issue that we're told that Keir Starmer, the Labour leader, may well actually whip his Labour MPs to vote against. But can he still, Boris Johnson, still get that through? So we'll talk about all of that coming up. But the director of the Big Brother Watch, Silkie Carlo, is joining us now. And good morning to you, Silkie.
Good morning.
Good morning. Now, there are lots of different issues related to vaccine passports, whether we get them through, the ethical issues, the practical issues, and of course, the economic issues, the impact they would have on the reopening of our society as well. But you at a Big Brother Watch, you're crowdfunding now for a full-on campaign, a legal review of this issue, because you have some very, very serious ethical concerns.
Absolutely, ethical, moral, legal. Where do you stop? There's no real sense to COVID passports, and there is no way that we're going to let them become a part of everyday British life. So we've started a crowdfunder a little over 24 hours ago. We've raised £40,000, and our aim is to build the biggest possible campaign that we can to prevent COVID passports becoming a reality domestically in the UK. But if they do, we won't stop the fight. So our intention then is to start a legal challenge. Unfortunately, it seems that the government's review was a sham. This seems to be a foregone conclusion. We're now finding contracts that go back months and months. So unfortunately, I think the government is going to try and press ahead with this, but I am feeling very optimistic about the amount of public support there is for us and the amount of public opposition there is to this, because that's something now really to be reckoned with. And we're seeing it with the cross-sectional support in Parliament too.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is the interesting thing. The government had a consultation. It ended Monday last week. And then they sort of went ahead with announcements very soon after. I mean, I don't know how Michael Gove had all that time to read all of those responses at the consultation. And as you say, we know
50, that we've got
50,000. I mean, that man can read really. I mean, he was Education Secretary. He's a bright guy. He can clearly read incredibly quickly. But he was going ahead with that. But we know that we've got, as you say, contracts going way, way, way back to even last October, when the government was apparently already looking at this. And we know that there's millions of pounds of government money has already been spent or given to companies. How would you go about doing this? We've already seen the app that people have. I mean, more for people for having this app, frankly, the NHS app on Test and Trace. That's already being told. If you reload your phone, you will actually get an update which will allow this vaccine passport to be put on. Now, let's go back a little bit in terms of the practicalities of this, because I was talking to an expert a week or two ago who's involved with NHS IT for obvious reasons for continuing his work. He can't come and talk to us on air or identify himself, but I've checked out he is bona fide and very, very, at very high level, pointing out that the practicalities of this are I mean, beyond comprehension, I think, to most ministers who seem unable to grasp an awful lot of the most basic facts about COVID. We do not have some sort of magic database where everybody who's had a vaccine is on that database. That doesn't exist. Every time you have your vaccine, that goes onto your personal private medical records at your GP surgery, and that's where it stays. So in order to have an app that says absolutely you are this person and you have had the vaccine, even if this did happen, that app would have to be able to access your personal medical records. Now, it wouldn't just be this one fact, a yes, no, have you had the vaccine? It would be all of your personal medical records. awful lot of people don't necessarily want their personal private records being accessible to anyone else in the state, or indeed a family member who's helping them to download this app. There are really serious issues about people's privacy here, aren't there? And the simple practicality of doing this.
Yeah, yeah. There's different ways that it could work, and actually, I mean, so there never has before been a population level vaccination database, but there is a vaccination management database that is used for the rollout of vaccines that normally relates to specific parts of the population. So, for example, the flu jab, you have, people who are particularly vulnerable who will be on the database, and it's kind of it's temporary. So whilst people are being offered a vaccine, then they're on this list, and then they can be ticked off. So this is a thing, because we're now trying to implement population level health surveillance. We're either going to see a population level vaccination database being created, being stored, being made temporary, or we're going to see this app going into the backbone of the NHS, as you say, and giving access to health data. I have no doubt that they could find a way perhaps to try to start with just one vaccination, but it's neither here nor there, because anyone living in the real world knows that this would very soon become, it's so illogical to do it for this. Why not expand it to other health issues, other vaccinations, etc., etc. This is when we're campaigning against their ID cards, it was seen as a long-term risk that, one day an ID card could even have health data on it. One day it could have biometrics data on it. Here, the initial proposal that the government is bringing forward looks to have both of those things already. If this is the starting point, I cannot bear to think what the end point would be.
Well, and we know what the end point is, because it's playing out on the other side of the world right now. Now, I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I'm not a sort of a fearmonger on this, but we can see what's happening in China. I'm sure you can go into more detail for my listeners in terms of what they're doing there. And I've seen article after article in the so-called sort of liberal media saying, isn't it outrageous that we've got these cards in China which basically monitor every single thing a person does? It's outrageous. And, let's bring in vaccine passports here that will monitor everything. Tell us how it works in China and how significant it is.
Yeah, of course, in China, you have a social credit system whereby every interaction with the state, and then the kind of overlap between the private sector and the state, which unfortunately, aren't we seeing that here with the COVID response as well? Every interaction is logged, you are scored, and you end up being a kind of subject with a risk score. And lots of data can be gathered about you simply by your face, because of the amount of facial recognition that they use there. And we've been warning for some time that in so many ways, UK policies are actually drifting in the direction of China. It's not even hyperbolic to talk about this anymore. Yeah. We're on the precipice of every citizen in the UK having basically a biological risk score that is managed by a facial recognition system. And we are second to China in the world for having one of the biggest surveillance networks. So it's not too far. We used to talk about a tiptoe towards this kind of authoritarianism. We're now basically sprinting along the way there.
With our arms open wide saying, come on in, the water's lovely. That's the terrifying thing. This is stuff that was sort of a few years ago, this would just be science fiction. And now it's becoming very real. But it seems to be welcome. So many people think it's a good idea. And this comes back to, again, the whole ID cards argument. It's the idea that we are not a papers, please society. There is no right to demand for officials or bloke in a T-shirt outside a pub to demand to see proof of anything. Yes, they're allowed to ask for proof that you are over 18 to go into a pub or a nightclub, or over 21. But that is very different. There are some levels of discrimination that we do allow. Again, the idea that, women only in some places, or men only in some places. There are, or children only in some places. There are good reasons for that. But with a vaccine that works, there isn't any good reason for it. If the vaccine doesn't work, let's not bother with it. But we know it does work, in which case, why would we need to have a vaccine passport? Because people are taking it anyway. But there'll be people listening to this who are saying, this is all a bit crazy. You're all getting a little, your knickers in a twist. If you've got nothing to hide, you're going to get the vaccine anyway. What's the big deal, Silkie?
Well, yeah, try telling that to people in Russia or people in Hong Kong or people in China. That is a grave mistake for any democracy to make. We don't operate on the basis of complete, unparalleled submission to the state. We have, it's
could have fooled me in the last year.
I know, but it is in principle important that we maintain a healthy balance between the citizen and the state. And here's what's really bad about COVID passports. We're talking about something that will be enforced between civilians, because it's going to be the bouncer on the door, it's going to be the boss at work, it's going to be shopkeepers. That makes for a very, very ugly society. No one made the point stronger against ID cards than, it's amazing to say, the likes of Boris Johnson and Michael Gove, who said, we don't live on license from the state. We're not a papers carrying country. And this is so far beyond that, it's quite unimaginable. But I am feeling positive that so many of us are opposing it. And I do think we're going to win.
Well, I mean, I wish you the best of luck on that. I was saying it's all got to come down to that vote in Parliament, doesn't it? But are you buoyed up also by the news? We've got Florida and Texas in the United States. Their governors have said they will not have state vaccine passports. They will not allow that. It will be outlawed. You're not allowed to ask for someone for vaccine status in order to allow them to use a service. But also the White House overnight, the press secretary there has said that there will be no federal vaccine passport system. Does that encourage you?
Absolutely. But I think as well, this is going to be a bit of a marathon, and we will see lots of democracies falling into this trap. And of course, this is going to take over in the European Union as well. And they've always wanted a vaccine certificate EU-wide. But I think it's a moment for, I would have hoped it's a moment for British leadership on an issue like this. Let's lead the way. Let's show other countries there is a way to emerge from this nightmare healthy, safe and free. And the British people are going to say, no, we're not going to be carrying vaccine IDs, health passes, internal passports, whatever you call it. When it comes to it, we're going to fight every step of the way. And if it means we have to just simply not comply, then we'll do that too.
I'm with you all the way. I've had my vaccine. I will not show proof of my vaccine to use a service in this country domestically. That I'm a free citizen. I refuse to do that. Silkie Carlo, Director of Big Brother Watch, thank you very much. Benjamin Butterworth listening to all of that, late editor of the I newspaper. Benjamin, are you willing to show a vaccine passport to get into a club, go to a pub, go to a shop? Do you think that's reasonable?
I'm willing to, once I've been lucky enough to get my first dose. But what I would say is that increasingly I'm questioning it because I don't understand what it's there to achieve. And so if it was there to achieve a higher take-up of the vaccination, if there were big questions about the rate to achieve herd immunity, I'd say I would strongly in support of it.
So you'd support something that basically forced people to have medical treatment they didn't want. Interesting. I thought you were a liberal at the I newspaper. That's what it would mean. That's what it would be. It would be forcing people to have medical treatment they didn't want.
But the situation is that we can't get out of this if we don't have enough people to get the vaccine. And if this is what nudged people that didn't have some sort of grand moral objection, but just sort of didn't want it, then I would say it's a good thing. But the fact is that isn't a problem we have in the first place. The numbers who aren't getting it are very tiny. And so that's why I question what the point is, because if people are already getting it, then there isn't a need to get more people to accept their vaccine. And secondly, if it's not going to come into around September, then I think there'll be a big problem in convincing people that they need it when life has been back to normal for 3 months.